Long ago in the North Country, there was a widow who was raising her 3 children on the very edge of the country by the shore. She had a farm, and she would teach her children this song. My mother told me someday I will buy galleys with good ore, sail to different shores. High on the prow I stand, a noble bark I steer, safely into the haven. Too many bowmen, I bet you didn't know that she taught Assassin's Creed Game Maker that song too. But her children remembered that song, and as they grew, they would sing it whenever they would go on a journey or whenever they would be building anything. Now, the oldest son was tall and broad and blonde and ambitious, just exactly what you think of when you think of a Viking. And the second child was also a son, not so tall and not so broad, and very shrewd and always very well dressed. And the third child, the third child was neither tall nor short, neither broad nor slender, neither son nor daughter, neither shrewd nor ambitious. And they called that child Espinash. And Espinash would spend most of their time inside with their mother playing in the ashes. And of course, their 2 older brothers would tease Espinash. Oh, you are such a silly child. You are such a silly thing. You're neither this nor that. You should come outside and work with us and play with us. But their mother would gently encourage those 2 older children outside and take the younger one and console them. Espinash, you may not be the tallest or the broadest or the brightest or the best dressed or the cleanest, but I love you. And you are kind-hearted, and that's enough. And so the children grew up into adults. And one day, when those children had all grown and were helping their mother on the farm, the king on the other side of the country woke up and said, I want a boat. I don't want just any boat. I want a boat that goes as well on land as it does on the sea. And the king called all of his advisors and all of his engineers, and they got to work, and none of them could do it. And so the king got very frustrated and said, all right, put the word out to everyone. And so the word was put out that the king really wanted a boat that would go as well on land as it would on sea, but no one could come up with anything. And so the king said, fine, I will give half of my kingdom and the princess's hand in marriage to anyone who can bring me a boat that goes as well on land as it does on sea. And the princess said, really? She was not happy at all. Well, it did bring quite a few would-be suitors to the kingdom, and they would try to build this boat, and the princess would go down and watch them and heap scorn upon their heads and laugh at them and needle them and just generally overall behave very badly, not just for a princess, but for anyone. But really, who could blame her? And soon the suitors, the would-be suitors, said that it was worse to face the princess than it was to fail before the king. And fewer arrived. But the message continued to go out further and further and further in the country until at last it reached the very edge where the widow lived with her 3 children. And the oldest son said, Mother, I think I could do this. I bet I could build a boat that went as well as it on land as it does on sea. All I need are the very best materials. Now, their father had been a boatwright, and there were very fine materials stored in their barn. And so they gave the oldest child all of the good materials. And his mother said, and you'll need very fine provisions. And she packed the very best food. And they sent him off, and down he went down the road. My mother told me someday I would buy galleys with the whoa. Right there in front of him in the road was an old woman. She was in terrible shape. Every ounce of her body was shaking, and she looked so frail. And the son thought, oh boy, I want to avoid her if I can. Just then, the old woman spoke to her and said, son, where are you going, my child? And the first thing that popped out of his mouth was a lie. Well, I'm going to the king to build a pigsty. Really? Well, as you say, so it shall be. And tell me, what's in that fragrant bag you have? And he looked at his provisions and he said, oh, well, this is slop for the pigs. Really? Well, as you say, so it shall be. And she stepped out of the way of his cart and he continued down the road. And you know what? When he got to the kingdom and he began to try to build a boat that went as well on land as it did on sea, all he could build were pigsties. And when he had built his third or fourth or 15th one, he thought, oh, boy, am I hungry. And he opened up his bag of provisions, and there, nothing but pig slop. And in disgrace, he went to the poorest section of town and began to build pigsties for the people there. Meanwhile, back at home, his younger brother had started to think, well, we would have heard by now if the oldest had built a boat that went as well on land as on sea. Mother, I think I could do this. And so she said, well, we don't have the best provisions. There are a few leftover things, and we don't have the best supplies to make a boat. Your father only left so much, but you may have the second best of each of those. And off he went down the road, very well dressed, as always. My mother told me someday I would buy. And there, right in front of him, was an old woman dressed all in rags and tatters that wavered while she shook. And her bent back was so low as she looked up and said to him, oh, my child, where are you going? And that shrewd boy, he thought, oh, I bet this is a trick. This is someone who's been sent to find out my plan. And so he said to her, oh, well, I am going to the king to build, well, a garden shed. Really? As you say, so it shall be. And what is in that bag? Manure for the gardens. Oh, well, as you say, so it shall be. And she stepped out of the way, and the boy went on, and I'm sure you know, when he got to that kingdom, all he could build were garden sheds. And boy, was he disappointed when he opened his lunch. Meanwhile, back at home, the youngest child, Espinash, said, Mother, my brothers have been gone for a very long time, and I do have kind of an idea. I've been drawing it in the ashes, and I'd like to go and try to build a boat that goes as well on land as on sea. And their mother said, well, we only have one child left, and kind of always thought you'd be with me forever. But if you would like to go, I will send you on your way. We barely have anything left to give you in the way of food, and there's not but a few scraps of wood left from your father's boat building days. But Espinache cheerfully took them on the back of their one donkey and went down the road. My mother told me that, oh, there in front of him was an old woman, and she was shaking and dressed in rags, and she looked up at that child and said, oh, where are you going, my dear? And Espinache said, my mother has always taught me to be kind, and you look like you might be in trouble. I am going to the king to build a boat that goes on land and sea, and these are all I have for lunch, but you're welcome to share this crust of bread and the apple. Really? Well, that's you say. So it shall be. And that old woman raised her hand and drew herself tall, and with a snap of her fingers became that most powerful, magical creature of all, the wise woman. And she said, my dear, since you have been so generous and so kind, I am going to turn your donkey into a boat that goes as well on land as on sea. And again, she snapped her fingers, and so it was. And Espinache was delighted. And then they said, oh, do you want to come along with me? And the woman laughed and said, no, no, no. But I will give you this ball of yarn that will take you anywhere you really need to go, and I will give you one warning. Anyone you meet along the way, you must take along with you in the boat. Okay, said Espinache, and off they went. And they really enjoyed steering that boat. It really went as well on land as they were sure it would go on sea. The wheels were smooth and turning along when all of a sudden, in Espinache's path, there was a man who was holding his belly and moaning, oh, I'm so hungry, and stuffing everything that was anywhere around them into their mouth. Hello, said Espinache. Who are you? Oh, I am always hungry. Oh, I just eat and eat and eat no matter what. I just have to eat. I'm always hungry. Well, said Espinache, you're welcome to come along with me if you'd like, and perhaps when we get to the kingdom, there'll be enough food for you to eat and not be hungry anymore. I doubt it, but I'd like to come. And always hungry, hopped onto the boat, and off they went. And it wasn't long before they were rolling down the road, and a woman was on the other side of the road. And she had a tap that looked an awful lot like one of those along the silver wall stuck in her mouth. And she was, and Espinache said, excuse me, what's going on with you? And she said, oh, I am always thirsty. I drank all the kegs in my entire village dry until the villagers kicked me out. And I'm just trying to suck the last few drops of mead out of this tap. Oh, said Espinache. Well, we're going to the kingdom. Perhaps you'd like to come along, and maybe when we get there, there'll be enough for you to drink that you won't be thirsty anymore. What's your name? Always thirsty. And she hopped aboard the boat, and off they went. And they had not gone very far down the road when they noticed that someone was walking along beside them. And Espinache said, excuse me, sir, who are you? And after he finished ducking, he said, Oh, hi. Uh, I can walk as far as I can see for miles and miles, can hear for miles and miles, but I just have everybody call me Miles. Oh, hello, Miles. What are you up to? Well, even though I can hear and see and walk for miles, I get awfully tired. And I noticed you a long way off and you've been taking on passengers. And I was wondering, could I come along? Of course. And Espinache invited Miles into the boat. And it wasn't long at all until they got to the kingdom. And when they got there, everyone came out to see. For here was the boat the king had been asking for. But when the king and his daughter came down to look at the boat, the king liked that boat, but didn't like the look of the person who was sailing it. I don't think I can let you have half of my kingdom and my daughter's hand in marriage. You are neither tall nor short, neither broad nor thin, and I hate to state the obvious, but you're neither man nor woman, and I just am very uncomfortable with all of this. Oh, said Espinache. Then I guess you don't get the boat. I really do want the boat. What do you think, princess? Well, the princess looked at Espinache and said, I think you should give this person one more task. And the king said, I knew I wasn't raising a dummy. All right, let's give you one more task. Besides the boat, we'll have you, go to the top of the farthest mountain that we can see from here on the balcony of the castle. And on that top of that mountain, I happen to know there's a very rare flower. And if you can find that rare purple flower and you can bring it back in, say, 12 hours, then the princess is yours and you get half the kingdom. All right, said Espinache. Wait. That was a little too easy, said the king. Before you go, there's a big wedding. Well, I think that you'd better clear out all the storerooms below so that everybody can come to this wedding. There's one locker that's full of enough food to feed the village in a siege for 7 days. And then we have, of course, our wine, our beer, our mead, our cider that is all done in the cellar that's enough to last for 3 generations. And after you've done that, bring back the flour, all is well. Well, I'm sure you know that Espinache immediately put Always Hungry into the room with all of the foodstuffs and put Always Thirsty into the cellar with all of those wonderful libations. And then Espinache talked to Miles and said, Miles, can you see the herb that's on the mountain? Piece of cake, said Miles. I'll be back long before your time runs out. And off Miles went, boom, boom, boom. And as far as they knew, he was heading to the mountain. In the meantime, the princess was noticing that these rooms had been cleared. And she thought, oh, you have some pretty good friends, Espinache. You're not as dumb as you look. And Espinache smiled and said, neither are you, princess. And they both laughed. But time was ticking along, and the king said, it's been 10 hours, and your friend hasn't come back. So maybe you're not so smart. Maybe you don't have such good friends after all. And Espinache started to sweat. Miles, can you hear me? And Miles, who had fallen asleep after such a long walk, woke up and shouted back, finding that he had yet one more talent. He could be heard from miles and miles away. I'm here, but I've fallen asleep, and I don't know if I can make it back in time. And that was when Espinache remembered that they had a ball of yarn. And they tossed that ball of yarn, and immediately they were brought right to where Miles had the herb, took that herb, rolled the ball of yarn back, and with 2 minutes to spare, handed it to the king. And the king took the flower and said, well, I don't know if I'm happy about this or not, but I really want that boat. So, okay, you can have all of the kingdom if the princess will marry you. And the princess said, well, if you split it with me so that we roll 50-50, you're on. And Espinache said, done. And that is how it was, or wasn't, a long time ago in the land of the North. You want to sing with me? My mother told me someday I would buy galleys with good ore, sail to distant shore, high on a prize and a noble bark I sail safely into the heart